All right, and we are live, and welcome to another episode of Leadership for the Physical AI Age. And I am so privileged to have Nick who's returning and Daniel Dangoor, who is going to be the chair for our treasury. And Dan's an amazing friend, and he's got an amazing experience in the investment world. And interestingly, he spent a lot of time thinking about physical AI. I don't think a lot of investors have done that. But Dan, maybe just tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and tell us about physical AI and where that's going, if that's a thing, really, right?
Sure. Thanks, Tito, for having me on. Yeah, as you said, I've been in the investment world for a while. I've been since 2008 in some way, shape, or form investing. Initially in a bank, stayed there for 10 years, then hedge funds for the past 10 years, with a 1 year sojourn at Goldman Sachs, where I headed coming up with thematic trading ideas, which is where I started exploring the idea of physical AI, which was interesting because I ended up sitting in many investment forums and investment dinners and lunches and breakfasts where I spoke to hundreds of investors. And the idea of physical AI for a long time was always like across the horizon. Everyone was always talking about the investment into semis and investment into the LLM models and all that. And robotics was kind of a conceptual next step of AI, but it was never very tangible, ironically, or metaphysically tangible. But what was interesting is whenever banks or analysts or some type of investors started treading water on talking about physical AI, they always went into either self-driving cars or robotics, and the whole robotics Olympics in China and all that, brought it on stage, and we saw what robots can do. But that concept of physical AI is very narrow, very specific, and very different to the way I saw that the world would have to go if physical AI is going to be a thing. And we heard recently, Jensen, I think, at the beginning of the year, he mentioned, I think it was January this year, he mentioned the chat GPT moment of physical AI is around the corner. And right after that, NVIDIA showed their new chip, which I forget which is the denomination right now, but the one which was specific for physical AI. I don't know if you remember this. Specifically, they came up with a chip for physical AI. And
We don't want to trademark it. Yeah, we don't want to. So once
it's
we close the Nvidia deal, we'll promote it.
fine. Okay. Okay. I'll keep it in my chest.
It's
But
one of the Nvidia chips. Yeah.
the basically, I mean, from before that, I was looking into physical AI, and I noticed that what what was, I mean, with developing AI as a whole, what we've been using specifically for the LLMs has been all the text information that we have, both from historical texts that we have from humanity, everything that's ever been written and preserved, and also everything on social media and everything that's being written right now. And basically what we did is we trained all these LLMs on the maximum amount of information possible. And there's been a few neuroscientists who are involved with AI, which have made the analysis of, you know, how many data points do I have to train an AI LLM, and how many data points does a baby need to develop, right? And by the age of 4, a baby has had multiples of data points more than an LLM has been trained on. Basically saying that as smart as you can make an LLM, it's limited by the amount of data points that it has to be trained on. So we can reconfigure the architecture, we can reconfigure the language, but it's only smart to a certain point because it's limited by the number of data sets that it has. And why does a baby have more data sets? Has it read more than the LLMs? No, it hasn't read more than the LLMs, but it's got exponentially more input into its brain by feeling out the world, by seeing things, by hearing things, by talking back, by interacting physically in the world. We have our skin as touch sensors, we have heat sensors, we have all these other sensors which help develop our brain. And so from there I extrapolated and I said, okay, so the next step for AI is to actually feel out the real world.
This is brilliant. Yeah.
So you have to feel it out. And to do that, one of the examples is Shell, if I'm not mistaken. I think I can mention Shell.
Yeah.
Shell,
Yeah. Right.
on one of their oil rigs, they put sensors to feel out the heat, the pressure, etc., so that they could optimize other rigs. So how to make production and extraction, etc., optimal. So first they had to feel out one of the rigs so that they could understand what was going on, and then step 2 is optimizing using AI to figure out how to make the other oil
That's
rigs
fair.
more efficient.
That's where
So,
half of the trifecta team comes from.
well, there you
That
go.
that project. So yeah,
And that's kind of where we met when we started talking. It was basically, this is what I was exploring. And then you came to me. This is the ideas that I'm coming up with. I'm like, oh, great! This is exactly what I think is the next step of AI. So yeah, so that's
interesting,
where I'm
interestingly, very yeah. So interestingly, very few people see that, right?
agreed.
So because we are a little bit ahead of our time, and physical AI is not really the thing that everyone's talking about, but key people are talking about it. Investments flowing that way. We understand the need for data. There's only so much a language model can do in the real world, in the real economy. I'll sort of pass the topic on to both of you in terms of why is physical AI relevant today, right? Is this a conversation we need to be having 2 years in the future, or is this a conversation we need to have right now? I'd love to hear your perspective since both of you have done so much work in the physical AI space, both from you, Dan, from an investment perspective, and Nick, from helping start up physical AI companies. Keen to hear both your thoughts.
Well, I mean, to just start with the argument is I think language can only go so far. And like, yes, we see AI right now on these incredible chatbots. And yeah, I'm, amazed what Claude can do every day, but still it's using language. And I've talked to various neuroscientists, even in my field of coming from like theology and philosophy. And like, if you're only using language, you can only go so far. And even those fields say like, yeah, there's always going to be, even it comes down to semantics. And so that's why I say, like, for AI to take off, it can't just be limited to a human language.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of exactly the same avenue I was going down with with what I've been seeing. Basically, there's a limitation. There's a ceiling to how much we can do with just language. But then the next step, from what I see, is one, using sensors to feel out, and then two, using those same sensors to actually apply them. So one is the intake of information, and the next one is the actual action taken on top of the data that one has done. And then that comes into every single industry that one can think of, even if it doesn't mean removing humans. So that's the thing. Physical AI doesn't necessarily mean removing humans. Robotics kind of means that. But robotics is, as I said, just one sliver of it. You can just optimize how humans should do things and, actually measure what is going on in the physical world. So one of the applications which I find really interesting is measuring. So I'm also involved in this project in Brazil with mining, specifically with rare earth mining. And I've spoken to a few partners where it is possible to start analyzing with AI in location the amount of different rare earths in a specific land. Very different to how we do things right now. Right now, we need to send it to a lab. It takes like 2 to 3 months to actually figure out what's going on there, etc. Now you can do it in location with AI. That is an application of physical AI. So to get to that point, then are you removing humans from the process? You're not. You're just optimizing and making something that takes 2 to 3 months into a day, and then from that on, humans can make a better decision rather than having to wait for a decision. So, I mean, there's so many different applications that it's just insane to think of it. It really is much bigger than the LLM, much bigger than the chatbots, as they put it. And the world has not started looking at it or talking about it, which is understood. We're still building out the infrastructure, and we have to focus on that. But a few of us are looking. And interestingly, the way I look at investments is not specific stocks. I look at baskets, so like a bunch of stocks which have a theme in common. And even if only 5% of that business, or five might be too little, but like 15% of that business is involved in that theme, it's part of the basket, but it's not fully that. But as a whole, when you look at it, when they move together, it's because that theme is actually when the correlation is high between them, it's because that theme is what's pulling it rather than the individual idiosyncrasies of the stocks. And all the AI baskets have kind of moved very quickly up in the past 18, 24 months. Some in different periods, like energy was at the beginning, and then eventually infrastructure came in, and then semis had its moment, and then now had its moment again. But what was lagging by far were companies who were involved in building sensors. They were lagging ridiculously, like by 2, 3, 400%. And in April this year to now, they've rallied over 80%. So something's picking up, and it's from the demand side. It's not from the speculative side. People aren't talking about it. So it's not a speculation like the other parts are. There's less froth in it. It's more about there's actually demand pickup in sensors and people trying to figure out how to feel out the real world. When you go into robotics, I don't even mean just humanoid robots, but robotics in general. 60 to 70% of the cost of the arm in the factory floor is the sensor. And another 20% is the brain, which is the NVIDIA chip, basically. And then the rest is without. So it's actually, there's more cost to the sensors than there is to the brain, which is impressive. So as I said, like this is maybe the next investment that people should be looking at, but definitely the future of how things are going to roll. And
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
We just keep it with us. Yeah.
So just, set a conflict.
So yeah, and it's quite amazing because I remember your note with regards to physical AI and how the US hegemony is going to drive the next wave of growth, right? And that's kind of where we see physical AI really come into play. Right? But here's the thing, right? From basically from investments inside Trifecta, basically trying to stand up companies in physical AI, we see that, the sensor fusion part is not 100% there. You've got LLMs, which are almost mature, frontier models, which are very mature. And then on top of that, we've got this new wave called the VLMs, which is the vision language models. And that's where you have the fusion between language and vision, and which is an integral part of getting data into, so basically understanding data and sort of spatial data. And then we've basically get to integrating process data. So we can do it in silos. We still cannot do it at scale. And doing at scale, there's some amazing work with temporal fusion transformers. So the underlying transformer model has to change to accommodate large sensor integration. I mean, obviously governments do it, but it's not a commodity. It's not a thing. It's not a company or people can do. So there's underlying investment in that. Well, there's investment in the underlying tech that needs to be mature before physical AI becomes a thing, of a commodity that anybody can use. So I'm keen to see. So in terms of geopolitics, in terms of the macro factors, what are we looking at? What do we need for people? It's not just one or two companies, but it becomes a thing globally where physical AI is, and that's kind of where the revenue side comes in, right?
Yeah, that's a
Loaded question.
No, that's the word I was looking for. It's a loaded question because I will have to mention things which are, let's say, controversial, but it has to be said because it's got to do with the macro backdrop. So, like, one thing I truly believe is that the current administration in the U.S. has reignited the imperialistic behavior of the U.S. I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just saying this is what's happening.
The fact.
They've said the West is ours. Powers of the East stay to your East, and stop meddling around with whoever's close to us. Want access to the oil in my part of the world. I want access to the rare earths in my part of the world. Get your stuff out. So that's part of the imperialistic hegemony I've been talking about, and the way I look at it. One issue to that behavior is that the US election cycle is quite short, and you take this imperialistic posture, and if suddenly the other party wins in the next election, you have to kind of unwind this whole thing. So I'm not sure how that plays out because of that, but assuming that I have to make an assumption to make an investment or to make whatever thesis I'm coming up with, and my assumption is that the behavior that the U.S. is taking, even though it's aggressive and radical and has shown military and political strength that the U.S. hasn't shown in a long time. Again, not saying it's right or wrong, just saying it is what it is. It has put the U.S. in a place that the fruits of this action have to be beneficial to the country. If not, this whole thing unravels. And what they have been doing is that, look, I want access to rare earths. I want access to energy, because these two things are necessary for the two strongest things that I need to invest in for the future, for the survival of my imperialistic view, which is AI and defense, right? So all the metals involved with either one, be them rare earths or be them specific types of compounds that you need, they are being fought over. And even, people are joking about Greenland and joking about how the US was acting, but at its core, it's trying to survive with whatever it needs to keep its hegemony. And I think it's working. I think that the way the administration has acted, maybe once or twice tripping over its own feet, once or twice making some decisions which were too harsh. I do remember Vivek mentioning something before he left the current government. And what he said was, which was interesting, that to make certain decisions, you either have to do too little and then have to live with the consequences of doing too little, or you do too much and you live with the consequences of doing too much, but it's very hard to get it right. And he said this administration has chosen to do too much because it's better to have to fix the excess of the mistakes than having to take a decision and not actually going through what you were doing. So all this is like the mentality and the concept behind the hegemony is like, we're going to keep power. We're going to get the Eastern powers outside of our hemisphere, be it the Northern or be it the Eastern or Western or whatever. But like 3/4 of the world are kind of claiming theirs. And so the backdrop basically is this: look, I want enough power that I can continue being the leader of the world. And even though China and Russia are very strong contenders, the ideology behind their behavior is not just different, it's a threat to my hegemony. So the US has stopped acting as if it's turning a blind eye. Now it says, like, I know what you're doing. I know you also want to be number one. Like, I'm not letting you. Like, right. I'm not going to pretend anymore. I'm not letting you. And then the consequence of this has been hyper investment into AI, hyper investment into defense. For some reason, defense has stopped acting as if it's getting hyper investment and all the attention has been going into AI. But basically, it's a mixture right now of a gold rush for the commodity of compute power and the space race of being the first one to reach whatever we want to reach. We're not clear what it is. Is it AGI? Is it ASI? What is it? We don't know. We don't know where it is. We don't know where we're going, but we know we want to be the first. And that means that the investment into it is infinite. It's like, it's a survival of the one, whoever reaches there first. There's no other way. That we've started the race and we don't even know where it's going. It's not like it's a space race. We knew we had to get the moon. We don't know where we're going, but we know we have to be first. So it becomes unlimited investment into it, which has kind of been my thesis since the beginning of this AI gold rush. Basically, it's not going to stop until we get to hyper productivity of the world. You asked it, or where are we going with this? What has AI actually done? AI hasn't done anything. Well, it's definitely shown people that that it's a powerful tool that you can use to increase productivity. It's shown people that. So people don't doubt it anymore. Like Nick said, I'm impressed at what Claude can do every day. Absolutely. Absolutely. Like a year ago, I felt like I was too old to catch up with programming. And I was like, you know what? I'll just hire programmers to do it for me. Like it's just changed too much. I can't be bothered. Now I'm, programming 3 things at the same time. So this is amazing. Like I couldn't do this. I did not have the ability to do this. Now I can come up with reports and, if I want to come up with something to say on this podcast in 5 minutes, I can come up with something and it'll give it to me. So we've gotten far in showing that productivity can be increased. Has it increased yet? We don't know how to measure that.
Has it changed the GDP is the question. That's the $1 billion question or $1 trillion question right now.
Yes, that is the few $1 trillion question. Right now, like last year, GDP was quite strong in the US, and ironically, it was zero affected by AI. Definitely not by productivity, because AI wasn't where it is now last year, so it couldn't have increased productivity. It was more of still adapting to it. Probably actually a drag on productivity in the beginning because there's a learning curve. But at the same time, actually, what was imported and what was exported from the US was kind of the same. It was net flat. So it actually didn't affect GDP, ironically. So when it does hit, and I think it will hit, it will be absolutely impressive. It will be very impressive. And again, I'm not trying to say anything is good or bad here. I have my worries about AI. I am not like a fan of everything that's being done with it. I'm actually just probably I like 20% of what's been done with it, and I don't like 80% of what's been done with it. And Nick mentioned, his background with theology and philosophy. And part of my background is theology as well. And I've tried exploring with some people who are building their own LLM models. What if you train it on religious thought? Does that change the morality of the model or not? Right? Because it's a worry we have, right? But that's a different discussion. I don't think that's a discussion which involves physical AI, but it does involve the direction of where we're going with this as a species, I guess.
Physical AI is AI is the foundation of physical AI. So you build physical AI, and so whatever thought process actually goes into the bottom AI is what trained on the top, right? Just to interject, and Nick, I know we haven't heard from you, and we've got 5 minutes left in this episode, but I remember we were working on AI and rankings in the 2010s. And one of the things we struggled with at that time was at that moment, the conversations were different. How do we make a business case for AI and investing into AI? And looking at and sort of coming back to some of your points you mentioned earlier in terms of training kids up and teaching educational pieces that a baby learns in, say, from birth to 6 years old, that's formed the foundation of how you teach robots and robotics and really how AI is being trained. Now, this is another problem, but I think it's outside the scope of this episode, and I would love to have you back and talk about it, the morality and the ethics of it, because the governance is going to be a huge part of what we do. I think once we get moving, we definitely need to have you guys back and talk about the governance of AI, because the origins of AI is not necessarily clean. So without going too much into detail into that particular topic. So with physical AI, again, we have an option right now to actually train it up properly. I'm keen to hear from Nick in terms of how we're going to train physical AI systems, right? It's not, so everyone thinks about physical AI as either self-driving cars or, the killer robots from Arnold Schwarzenegger coming back. So how is that different? Where do you see it? Keen to hear your thoughts.
Well, and yeah, we've mentioned before, I work a lot on growth. So hiring the teams, what systems need to be put in place. And I would say there's a lot of dirty jobs out there that honestly, I can't find anyone like even paying them, the equivalent of $200 or euros an hour and having them go out 12 hours out in the desert to check pipes. It's like, yes, they get a good payday out of it, but do they want to do it? Like there's a point to that. And I think there's a point where physical AI can serve a need in humanity. It's like we don't have to require these people who have families to attend to other priorities to spend days on end checking physical infrastructure, going deep into the earth. So that's what I'm excited about. And I think that's where physical AI comes in. And, you can see it as not as what Daniel said, it's a gold rush. There's so many people in it just to make a quick buck and take it there, but saying like, no, this is something that will help push humanity forward and something that we all look back and it's like, well, think of when we used to have to do that, when people would literally have to go into these mines and climb these structures just to get a sensor reading. So that's the promise I have for it.
All right, we're about to end for this episode. Thank you so much for having both of you. It's been an amazing discussion. We'll be back in the next episode and further deep dive into physical AI, investments into physical AI, and where the money needs to flow for the next topic. Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you in the next one.
Yeah. See ya.